Without wasting much of your time, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Dear viewers, tonight we're going to speak about different countries. David Bureau is a PhD candidate, is now in the UK. Dr. John Quick from America, and Dr. Quick from America as well. And some of the topics we are going to debate with. going to be very interactive discussion. So if we can start with being going to introduce himself, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Luarej, and the African World Book. My name is Deng Duot Bior. I'm a PhD candidate here in University of Dundee at the Center for Energy, Petroleum Law, and Mineral Law. I am really happy to be here with my colleagues, and I hope they will introduce themselves. And we will take it over to the South Sudanese, and we'll be talking about the topic that we want to discuss today. Thank you.
I I don't hear you, Peter Lwal. I, I'm not hearing you at all. I don't know. Could that be my device? I'm not. I have no clue of what is happening now, so I'm not hearing you. I heard them, but I didn't hear you. Yeah, I'm hearing you now a little bit. Your voice is very low. I don't hear Lwal as well.
I don't think we
Yes.
can hear you well.
Okay. I hear Mr. Deng very clearly.
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Philip.
Yes, I can hear you too, Philip.
Not really.
Not. I think the problem is with Peter.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Okay,
Can hear
sorry,
you.
I apologize for any inconvenience. Dr. Jones, I would like you to introduce yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, my name is John Queck, John Chol Queck, living in San Diego, California. I'm a psychologist by training. I have a PhD in psychology. I specialize in my practice now in marriage family therapy, meaning I counsel children, couple, individuals, and group. So my dissertation research is in trauma. That's what I research trauma in relation to war in South Sudan, the long civil war in South Sudan. So I'm currently practicing as a trauma professional as well. So those are the areas of my interest.
Okay, Dr. Philip, Dr. Philip Tormanyok, can you introduce yourself again? Thank you. Dr. Philip, yes, you're not very clear. Try to speak up. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Philip. Yes, Dr. Philip. Yes, try to speak up. You're not very clear. Yeah. Hello, Dr. Phil.
Are you guys able to hear me well?
Yeah, move closer to
Uh,
your telephone.
I I hear you too. You are heard by us.
Okay. But I guess I will I will introduce myself while Peter Wall is figuring out his mics. If you are able to hear me. My name is Philip. Now I'm South Sudanese living here in the United States, state of Missouri. I'm
Dr. Philip is not very clear.
VP in conflict and housing resolution in an area of focus where I invest my dissertation on the issue of cattle rustling.
Dr. Philip, you're not very clear. Dr. Philip.
That's young lady. Um, Currently, I'm working at a pharmacy consultant, and also I'm working with people with mental disabilities as well. Um, I have also a background in international relations and position that is relevant to discuss the philosophy. So, that's a little bit about myself. Looking forward to discuss this very important topic. This is Holly for waiting and looking forward to discuss all of you. Yeah, thank you.
I think Dr. Philip is not clear. Deng, come back again to introduce yourself fully because I think, yeah, you just want to say your names.
All right. Thanks again. My name is Deng Duot Bior. I am a PhD student here in the Center for Energy, Petroleum Law, and Mineral Law at the University of Dundee. I did my master's in international criminal law, petroleum law, and mineral law. I also work in the United States with a law firms in the US, as well as I used to do legal advice and working also with immigration. I am really happy to be part of the panelists today. We'll be talking about the issue of cattle wrestling. It's good, my pleasure to meet both researchers as well as my host, Peter Lual. Thank you.
It is a great pleasure to have you. Without going to much details, we are very much aware that there had been issues in the country, which goes back to a couple of 20, more than 20 or 30 years ago, when the
Now we
liberation.
lost you, Peter Lwal.
Okay, you lost me again. Then can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, so when the liberation of South Sudan struggle started, now there is ongoing cattle raidings and also child abductions, something that Dr. Philip, we will have Dr. Philip to give us a brief information of what are the cause and the solution. And then Dr. John will talk about the impacts of the war on the people's psychology and well-being.
I don't
And
hear anything, guys.
okay, something is not right. John, can you hear me now? Dr. Philip, John, hello, John. Can you hear me? No.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you
I
clearly.
don't hear. I don't hear you guys
Okay.
at all.
We don't know what the issue is. Dr.
I can hear you.
Dr.
Yeah.
Dr. Philip, if you could briefly tell us of what are the causes of the cattle wrestling and the child abduction in South
Sorry.
Sudan, and particularly.
Yeah, maybe try to take off your Bluetooth.
Eh? And especially
Peter,
in
do you
Congolese.
guys
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
I'm not. I'm not hearing you guys. Not at all.
I think you need to. It would be good to maybe come back.
It says waiting to go live.
No, you are already with us. You can exit and come back.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Phil, if you could tell us what are the cause of the readings and the child abductions in Jonglei. Oh, Dr. Philip Paul up as well. Um, so I think the two of them have gone up. John Quick.
Yes, I'm back. I'm fully back, man. I don't know what is happening there.
That's what happened to me a while ago, so I apologize. And Dr. Philip just went up and is coming back as well.
Yeah, it's going to be very challenging if it keeps doing that.
Oh,
Mhm.
Dr. Philip, you came twice. Lock one up, Dr. Philip, please. You are in twice, Dr. Philip. Dr. Philip, try to get up and come back. Okay. It's getting late at some places here in Australia, and I think it would be nice if we can. Okay. Dr. Philip is in the waiting room, and then can I take you out and come back? Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. Come back soon. Yeah, let me check because Dr. Philip double himself. Okay. Dr. Philip, something is not right. He came twice. Uh, while we're waiting for Philip, I don't know it's coming. Dr. Philip.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, try to be very clear sometime. So we need you to tell us what are the cause of the cattle raidings and child abduction in Jonglei area. To be brief, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be brief, guys. Well, first of all, thank you to Salwal for this very important discussion.
Your
And
voice is very low, very low.
can you hear me much better now?
Yes.
Okay. Um, the issue of cultural rustling can be very complicated, but we'll try to make it simplified.
John, move closer, move closer. Your voice is not clear, please.
Are you able to hear me clearer now?
Yes.
The issue of cultural rustling, there are no real clear um, factors or cause of problems, but we will try to discuss them in a way that people will understand much better. As far as what, if you look at the situation, the first of all, one thing that we have is the property. Those communities in Jonglei are farmers. Murley use mixed practice where they farm and raise animals. So, given the nature of conflict, uh, there is, I believe, among some people that the only way to get food is to involve in cattle grazing. So, whether it's Murley or the Beaver in the jungle or the Moor, the issue of poverty is totally about. The other factor is cultures. There is very strong belief within this three communities that lives revolve around cattle. So cattle being a certain aspect of this society, it motivates people to acquire more cattle, to include them as part of their livestock and identity. Because cow itself is an identity animal. The more cows some people have in some communities seen as a sign of wealth. Acquiring more cows do have benefits. Third is uh, the governance. The area, the jungle itself, is a very vast, it's a very big, huge state. Since the independence of South Sudan, uh, there has been a 12 vacuums, whether at the local level or at state level. Without governance in person, people turn to updating law then. When you have some people that to other communities to steal the cows because government is ineffective, it's not efficient. So that is a big factor. So each community is taking political power vacuum and use it to uh, in, impose issue on other communities in the area. In this case, who sell or cattle. Fourth itself is uh, the jungle lake is witnessing high rise because of males. The dowries that are being paid are increasing. And given the poverty, the regulation, and the demand for young men to get married, uh, and the lawlessness has given more youth to go out and look out. People will be as part of the society marriage. So that's another factor. The fifth one, I will just cover the main factors. There are so many factors. Is large finance. Before the Civil War started in 1983, there were less firearms in Africa. And as we speak today, according to Human Rights Watch, there are more guns in South Sudan than people. When I did my research, it's average 2 to 7 guns per person, but there are close to 30 million firearms in South Sudan. So if the population is roughly 12 million, we are talking about 2 point something firearms per person. So that make it easy for people to arm themselves and engage in issue. So those are the five yeah, better, but as the discussion progresses, since we are dealing with four factors that happen. The last one probably economics of answer. So um, the government and the people, so many other groups have been engaged in destructive politics that is actually not benefiting the country. If people don't see a state institution functioning, then uh, there are growing number of militant groups that are springing up, and this militant group that sometimes provide a leeway for firearms being up in the hands of civilians. So that's another factor that has been. Um, but like I say, those are the main factors. The rest will come as the discussion progresses.
Okay, now we will go to Deng Duot Biur. South Sudan gained independence in 2011, and the oil abstraction has been going on. We don't know the impacts of that practice, whether there are policies governing the companies to safeguard the life of people living in the area. So, based on your experience, Dr. Dengs, what are the social, economic, and environmental factors which may affect the the native of that areas, and what can be done in relation to such practice? If those practices are not there, are there generic policies which can govern uh, the oil abstracting companies? Because we have seen children and people living there are affected, and it's going to have a long-term impact on the people. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Uncle Wal, and thank you, Dr. Pili, for a good representation on the impact of cattle raiding. Yes, obstructive industry in South Sudan is a big issue. The oil, mining, and dump. And my area, or the main obstructive industry working in South Sudan, is oil. Oil was discovered in 1959 in Sudan when Chevron was given a concession by the Sudanese government, and they did the oil exploration and found oil in South Sudan. Before South Sudan got independent, all the oil were being exported into the north. South Sudan started exploiting, and exporting oil in 1997 when Umar Bashir went to China and gave the Chinese company concession to build pipeline, which was built by the Indian company, and the export was given to China, where Chinese needed oil. On the impact of obstructive industry on the local communities as well as to the people of South Sudan economically, socially, and environmentally. When we talk about social impact, we're talking about issues concerning the local communities, whether they are being displaced from their communities, whether their land was taken away, whether there was war, as we have seen in Tarjas, as we have seen in Malakal area in Apanal in 1997, and Ruwing in 1997 as well, where people were displaced as a result of obstructive industry when Landin, which is a Chinese which is a Canadian oil company, and Netherlands shareholders were accused. The CEO is right now being accused of crimes against humanity and war crimes in Netherlands. Economically, yes, most of South Sudanese were not benefiting from the oil revenue in 1997 until when South Sudan got independent. So that means they were not getting benefit from that, whether the government as well as the citizens who are living in those oil-rich area. Environmental factors such as pollution, gas flaring, and desertification. Those are the three impact brought by extractive industry into the local communities. As the impact today, we have seen environmental impact in places like Tarjast and in places like Upper Nile region, Napadang area. Most of those areas have been affected. Recently, there was an oil spill close to 2 kilometers. There was a research done by the Canadian NGOs, and they found out that the oil pollution in that area was severe. Even it was found in people's hair because people used to drink water, and those water are contaminated with lead. There were incidences where children are born with missing parts, and one of the scientists from Alaska interpreted that and said it was a result of environmental impact. The oil pollution in South Sudan is the same as what we have seen in Nigeria. The same thing impact in what we have seen in Nigeria is the same thing that we are going to see or we have seen in South Sudan, where communities were displaced due to lack of land acquisition and compensation for local communities. People were not asked to give their land out as it is required by the International Labour Organization, ILO 169, Article 7, that said that required pre-and informed consent, where people would be consenting to the abstractive industry and be compensated as well. That has impacts socially and economically because many of South Sudanese are cattle keepers or agro-pastoralists. And be compensated as well. That has impacts socially. So that is a major issue because South Sudan land acquisition process is inadequate, or people who are working in that area lack the expertise and would always rely on the international NGOs as well as different experts. Like South Sudanese get advice from a youth from Guinea who advises South Sudan on local contents. South Sudan get 98% of its GDP from extractive industry. However, with the local community is not benefiting from the revenues. Why? Because there is no community development agreement put in place whereby communities can benefit from the extractive industry revenue. Although there's a document that used to say that the local communities living in the oil producing area used to get 2%, but that thing is not being implemented or it's not in its place. It's what we call good law. And that transcends to the topic that we're talking today. If people are affected economically, socially, they will enter into what is called what we are discussing today as cattle wrestling. The same thing we are discussing today we're experiencing today in Jonglei is going to be it's going to be worse in the near future. I'm not saying it's going to be we're going to have bad whatever, but we are going to see a result of that when a land is going to be asked by Total or Oranto Tower, who have a concession in Jonglei State. If you have gone to Ethiopia, you might have passed in a place called Kajtong, and you might have seen drums. Those were used by Total. Although Total has lost concession, the concession was given to Oranto and Talo. They have done seismic, and they are going to start oil production soon. In the near future, if communities are not given that powers or given that opportunity for land acquisition, then what will happen? We will have a land issue, as we have seen in Kasese, Uganda, where politicians went there and bought land. And when the process of land acquisition comes in, it was only politicians who benefited rather than the citizens who are there. And that will have impact, as we have seen in Tarjas and in Ruang State. So those are the impact of extractive industry. With COVID-19 coming in, we don't really know what will happen. We will see a good economical impact on South Sudan. South Sudan export over 98% of its revenue to China. And now because of COVID-19, we are going to see a reduction on the economy of South Sudan. And right now, South Sudan is the only country that has passed its budget time without budget because of we don't know what will happen or due to the COVID-19 impact. So the extractive industry impact in South Sudan are severe, the same as to cattle wrestling. With that, I will be waiting for more questions to answer.
Yeah, that is really good. And we will go to Dr. John Quack, who is a psychologist, to tell us the impact of all this in humans, psychologists, whether psychology or whether the war that we have had for a very long time have also impacted people and has contributed to the cattle rate readings and the ongoing crisis in the country and what could be done. Dr. John, welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome, Brother Peter. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to the two researchers as well who have spoken earlier and have touched on very, very important point, Dr. Philip and Dr. Deng. Your points are well taken, very clear. I think you have done some of my homeworks, some of my works that I would that I prepared to present forward in a nice way, whereby I'm not going to go back and say, hey, impact of this, impact of that, altogether, transcend to this or result to this. So you guys have done that part. So now, in speaking from a human behavior perspective point of view, I have written a few opinion articles. I don't know if some of you have came across those. And one of those opinion articles is very recent. I wrote it in response to what is happening in Jonglei now between the Murali, the triangulation of cattle wrestling, the Murali down to Low Nuer, west to Dinka, Greater Dinka Bor. Then I wrote an article trying to come with a solution rather than in blaming the culprit or the perpetrator. So I kind of narrated what happened, why this thing is a non-going thing, is a never-ending situation, and I came down to what appears to me as a parent solution. So if you came across that, good. If you did not, please look for that, or I will forward it to you. Maybe Peter will make you get it. I talk more about what happened. So now, uh,
Okay. Briefly, can you tell us of why? What happened actually in that article? Tell
yeah.
us.
I'm going. Well, that article basically was kind of it outline what is out going on in Jonglei. When did this cattle wrestling started? Okay, I went back as far as I could remember, or as far as I can get some data. There, along the way, there have been so many peace attempts to bring the three communities together, and those peace attempts have failed. Now it keeps coming down until more players involved. Players, I don't want to name. You read it and find it yourself. Everybody that appears to be a stakeholder in Jonglei is part of that cattle wrestling going on now. So the normal cattle raid has upgraded itself into a more modern weaponry war. Okay, where you see this Klanshenkov, RPG, all the machinery gun being used in that cattle wrestling. So it kind of went, and higher than how it used to be when people use spears. Morale and Launuer and the Dinka, Great Dinka Boer use spear to go and snatch some cattle here and there. So that has changed. So that's the emphasis of what I wrote, and I came down to solution, my own opinion, solution. So let's leave it aside. You will read more on that. So now coming to what is happening, what we're seeing. Okay, I'm going to speak to you from a psychological perspective or human behavior perspective. Okay, related to psychological. There is something called societal regression. Societal regression. One thing I took out from a practice, and this has been was spirited by a therapist called Murray Bowen. Is one of the model used to help people who have issues, family issues. And Bowen have seen societal regression as a result of what? Families issues. Let's say, let's take the country back to 50 years of war, to the beginning of beginning of the country. Our country got its independence in 1956. And according to our collective knowledge or conscious about what happened in Sudan, war broke out in 1955, way before South Sudan became an independent nation. Okay, what happened then? So there was like a pause and war, a pause and war. So all of us, the young people on this line, were born and raised in the war. So do our parents as well. Okay, some of our parents were born, raised in war. So what happened? That war very much kind of ripped apart our social fabric. Okay, whereby norms in place that people respect have kind of fade away. We have seen killing in areas where the war was fought, was fought in South Sudan. So what happened? You see issues happening within a small group, within families. You see famine as a result of or lack of food as a result of lack of cultivation. Okay, and then what happened? You see anger in people. Okay, you see anger, lack of resources that the two gentlemen already touched on. Okay, so that's societal regression where you see hatred building up, kind of, went across South Sudan. I would put it this way. And what happened? We had a movement that was living in our areas. Okay, that was surviving in our areas. The movement that brought us the independence of South Sudan today. So societal regression, family issues, transmission goes into the society as a whole. What you see in South Sudan today, if we were very mindful when South Sudan got independent, one thing we should have put in place is to transform the mind of South Sudanese people from the wartime to peace and to modern life, whereby more education would have been allotted to the society of South Sudan, more money, security in place, and then that would be kind of alleviating this chronic hate in peoples, these chronic issues whereby, lack of having sufficient resources, result into, going to your neighbor and raid them for food, you know. This thing should have been the very first priority of the government to put in place. So without failure of doing that is what we're seeing right now. And these family issues as overspilled to the society. And then you see the government that seem to be like the government of South Sudan now is very much having no power to subdue all these issues going on in South Sudan. Okay, so who is it to be blamed here? Okay, without blaming anyone, we should first understand why we are now behaving the way we're behaving. Why our country is at war. Why other countries are exploiting our country. Why oil industries are now extracting oil without respecting the life of individual in those areas. Okay, they do not put protective uh, um, policies in place whereby oil does not really poison people. Children being born with missing limbs. What the hell is that? Okay, okay. If a land is given away, okay, so land acquisition in this rich world, in this modern world we're living in, is not easy. You get a piece of land and you pay so much for that land, and leave alone oil extraction. If you're trying to build something, you have to make sure that lead is banned in the United States. Lead poisoning, because it goes in your bloodstream and it really kill you and it kill your offspring. Okay, so what happened? Laws are put in place because of why we do not have a functional governance that is for the people, for the life of individuals living there. We are seeing all this exploitation left and right. Okay, very soon we will see our water being what do you call, privatized. Okay, you don't drink from the Nile River because you will get a stomach issue, but you buy oil water from us. Where is that oil will come from? From the Nile River. You will go and buy your own water. Oil is being attracted there, and gas is very limited in South Sudan. You're going to go and buy gas for your car from somebody
Okay,
else.
Dr. John, do you
So,
think that
yes,
the ongoing crisis, the
yes,
longest war, have had impact on the South Sudanese in diaspora?
yes. What we're seeing, the societal regression that I shared with you, you see issues in families. So during the war, everybody that involved that were born and raised in South Sudan went through uh, uh, a lot of repeated uh, issues whereby you barely survive, right? So, in another word, you see people are loosely using everyone in South Sudan traumatized. Okay, that has some truth in it. Because if you were born on run, if you see people dying left and right, then you yourself will have trauma in you. There is two types of trauma. There is primary trauma and there is secondary trauma. Most of us have witnessed people murdered in front of us. Okay? And then we took that along with us and we brought it here. Guess what? When you have a family, you raise your family. Okay? So you have some psychological issues going on there. So that psychological issue going on will lead you uh, to not have a functional lifestyle with your own family. Some people end up being drunk. Some people end up being abusive. Okay, so you see, some people end up committing crimes. It's because of what had happened. And those people who abuse alcohol or drugs kind of do it to just numb that feeling. Okay, so we brought that along with us, and it's hurting us in our families, in our communities. Okay, secondary trauma that has now followed us, even here in diaspora. When we hear death of our loved one back home, it's very traumatic. Some people end up in ICUs because of the death news from family members. So that itself traumatizes you. So we have seen that
And
trauma here. Yeah.
that that brought in the concern whereby the dead bodies are being shared on the social media, and I'm really very much concerned. So, what can we really do with regard to such practice?
People like myself have spoken so loudly about that, kind of um, criticizing people who do that. So sometimes people just do it as, oh yeah, the news come from me, or the loved one will see it, whatever, for whatever reason. That is bad. You see people get killed today. Nearby, you see an image on Facebook, a very graphic image on Facebook. You see somebody died on casket, being buried, and then you see people taking picture. from the dead person, they post it on Facebook. So people are not mindful about the impact, psychological impact in the families who see or view the image of the dead on the casket, okay, or out there laying dead somewhere. And people kind of do it as showing the world that, oh yeah, somebody, terrible happened here. It is not done like that. So people are traumatizing themselves, traumatizing other people without knowing, and that is bad, and we should all speak collectively against that.
Okay, we will come back to Dr. Philip. Dr. Philip, there is a concern. Your voice was not very clear, and I would ask you to move closer to your device and tell us what are the solutions to the ongoing current crisis in Jonglei area. I made an effort because Dr. Philip did his research wrestling in Jonglei state among the lower, the Dinka, the Murule. And I approached the current committee, which was constituted by the president, if they could consider including Dr. Philip in the program or in the investigation team, because he has already done a research. But I haven't heard back from them, from them, which is very unfortunate sometimes. So, Dr. Philip, what are the solutions? Because I think if I were the president or the person in charge, like Dr. Wani, I would have considered taking you on board. Can you tell us what the solution could be? And yeah,
Thank you once more.
no, you're not clear. Your voice up, up.
Is it too up?
Yeah, yeah. Be clear. Yeah, move closer to your mobile.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, move closer to your mobile. Raise your voice, please.
Well, I am too close to it, so maybe it's just the volume that is not going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will try to speak up a little bit.
Are you using mobile or the computer?
It's the cell phone.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the cell phone. So I hope you hear me clearly. Thank you, Dr. Quirk, for wonderful presentations. Yes, there are a few things that we might have to do if we are serious about solving this problem. There might be long-term solutions, at the same time, short-term solutions. The first thing that needs to be done is find a way to cut the cycle of violence. What I meant by that is anytime the Murle come to war land and take some cattle or even go back without cattle, the Boer are going to go back to Nuer. I mean to Murle. If the Nuer go to Murle, the Murle are going back to Nuer. So there is a vicious cycle that the war has created for a solution. We have to break the cycle of violence. How do we do it? Government intervention has to be a priority. And how that will be done is create a buffer zone within this common route. There are three common areas where cattle rustling happens, either in the Yurt or in a cover. People, from people to Upayo, or from people to Twig, or from people to Mars. So we know the corridors, we know the areas where the violence normally occurs. If the government is stationed, post there in those areas, that can cut.
Uh,
Are you guys not hearing me?
yeah, there is a concern. Your voice is too low. Can you? I would advise if you can exit and come back.
Okay,
Yeah.
will do.
Okay, Dr. Dings, we're now coming back to you. Uh, your points are a bit of concern. If you were to be the minister for petroleum in South Sudan today, what would you do? Now you have identified the issue with the long-term consequences.
Well, I just want to be Deng. I just want to be Deng what? I don't want to be a minister um, for now. I think a lot of things should be done in South Sudan. I will first start with the negative impact of obstructive industry. I will start with social. Social, you have people coming into the place. That means overcrowding, diseases will be there, HIV/AIDS, prostitution, social breakdown, whereby communities, corruptions, other communities coming in, whereby population goes up. We have seen that in the case of Nigeria, in Oguni area, pollution, the same thing in Oguni area. And when communities talk about the impact, then there is also another impact on them. In the case of Oguni, if I can mention a little bit, Sarawiwa was a leader, an activist, campaigning against shale oil because shale polluted their water bodies and they couldn't eat their own fish that comes out from their river. And when Sarawiwa talked, he was get done with by the government. So obstructive industry are not easy to deal with. Number two, what would I do? Back to your question, is having what's called community development agreement, as we have seen in the case of Alupo in Ghana, whereby communities have a right to say in what a development is going to be taking place in their area, as we have seen in Botswana, whereby Botswana government have what is called community development agreement, whereby a community comes up and say these are our priorities, as we have seen in Papua New Guinea, as we have seen in Canada, whereby the obstructive industry have relation with the communities so that they can work together. And from there, the communities will get benefit from the old revenues, as well as the companies will benefit from the communities, whereby there is a good working relationship. In the case of South Sudan, we don't have that. The Chinese are the one doing everything. South Sudan, we have good engineers, we have good people that can draft laws, but they are not being used, as you mentioned right now, in the case of Dr. Manyok, to give advice on what can be done. We have a legal advisor for petroleum, being Ayuk, who is from Guinea, advising South Sudanese, where we have a Tim Ding Malak, who graduated here with a master's degree in oil and gas. We have a child to advise the government on what can be done, but those people are not being used. So what can I do? Making use of the expertise within our country. What can I do? I will empower the local communities to have a say in the development, have provision for oil companies in case they abuse any policies that are put forward, then they will be fine. Whereby we would take them to court for human right violation as well as for environmental pollution. Even if there is no law that, because there's no convention on environmental pollution, but in the African Charter, Article 21, Article 21 said that there is a right for human right to clean environment. There was a case brought forward in UK, in European countries, but that case was brought under the privacy because of lack of convention for environment. But in the African Charter, it is there. As we have seen in the case of Sereyeko v. Ecuador, they have that case. South Sudan should draft a provision whereby communities can bring cases against the obstructive industry. I mentioned before environmental impact, displacement. People are being displaced from their area. They cannot farm. In the case of Tarijast, people cannot farm anymore. because when oil is spilled, then that area cannot function anymore. So we have seen that. And what can the communities do if leaders cannot pay attention to that? We have heard, I'm quoting here, we have heard leaders such as the former petroleum leader, minister, Lul Garquat, saying oil is booming. Oil is booming on other people, but it's not booming on communities. I would fix that if I were the minister. Although I'm not a minister, I'm just a student right now. I would fix that so oil can boom from the communities as well, whereby they can benefit. Why is that? Because oil is going to run out in the future. But if there is nothing benefiting the community, then these communities are going to lose in the long run. There is no decommissioning fund. I'll make sure there is a decommissioning fund, as we have seen in the case of Nordic countries, whereby there's sovereignty fund. There's no sovereignty fund in the case of South Sudan. Law is there, but it's lacking the implementation. Why? Because we don't have good lawyers that are there to hold people accountable. The case, another thing that I can do is reviewing the TFA. TFA is a tax fee for, it's an agreement, tax fee used by the Sudanese government, whereby the South Sudanese were paying the Khartoum government. And that agreement need to be reviewed. It's actually expiring this year, of which it's going to impact a lot of South Sudanese. So those are a few things that if something can be done, then they can be fixed that way. Communities, the oil belong to the country as well as the land belong to the communities. It is the right of the government to make sure there's a they have a right to the natural resource, and communities have a right to land as it is in the Constitution of South Sudan, Article 156 C.
Yeah, thank you, Deng Duot Bior. Dr. Phil, we will go back to you again. Please try. We need to benefit from your skill and the research. So, what are the solutions to the current cattle raidings and child abduction?
I hope you guys will be able to hear me this time.
Oh, that's very good. So now, you can start with the cause and then go to the solution. Thank you. In
All
five
right.
minutes.
I'll try. I'll try my best. I don't know what happened, but I'll do my best. Let's see. What are the cause? I said earlier that there are laws and traditional values. The long time ago, there were used to be norm, customary laws, and traditions that govern people ways of life. With respect to the wars that have happened, those laws, norms, customary laws have completely changed. The youth used to listen to the elders. As we speak, there are few youths that are listening to elders. So if the youth were to mobilize for cattle rustling back then, an elder will speak up and say, "You guys cannot go." Today, if an elder try to say it, that you don't have to go, that elder will be ridiculed as cowards, and probably other names will be uttered at him. There is also laws of ethnic identity. Back then, people used to identify themselves either Nuer, Dinka, or Murle. That identity had no problem then. But the change in perception of the identity is where the problem begins. We are now seeing identity. If I'm talking of Dinkabur, there is a belief that what I have to do has to defend the Dinkabur. The same thing with the other communities. So the change in identity has created an identity as me versus them, they versus us. So that has changed. The other thing that has also happened is ethnic politics. The politic in South Sudan is destructive as fire. The identity has blurs its boundaries. with the politics. So you see a politician talking as if he is the village leader, not forgetting that he's either the minister in a country or uh, a president or a vice president, but he speak as if he is a community leader, not as a national figure. The other thing that I said earlier is the lethality of the weapons that are being used in the cattle raid. Like Dr. Quick has already said that the weapons that are used are so sophisticated to the point that people are involved in technology like telephone, here by coordinating all the attacks. Back then, if you go to raid, how are you going to call somebody and say let tomorrow let me here and there? So technology has it's a double word. It's a two-edged sword. It's being used as destructive as it is. So that has changed and it's
Okay,
contributing to lethality of the
what are the
problem.
costs?
Now,
For instance, if you were to be the Dr. Wani of today, who is really keen to provide a long-lasting solution, you as a person who have already done a research in the area, so what were the costs and what are the solutions?
the cause of what I have just said earlier, the poverty is one of the causes. There is a need for people to earn living. That need is not being met, and that causes people to find ways to get few cows there and there. That's one. The other one is the price of marriage. There is so demand for cows across Sudan and South Sudan, for that matter. Where are you going to find a 25-year-old youth who has just finished high school because of the war, because they have lost everything? He has no job, and he has been pressured to marry somebody daughter for about, let's say, roughly 50 head of cattle. Where will they get them? They will be forced to go and steal, to meet that demand. So that the price of marriage itself is a problem. It's so high to the point that it's forcing people to do outrageous things. So that's one cause of the problem. The third one that I talked earlier briefly about it is the issue of uh, cows as a symbol of wealth. You know, if you have more cows, you will be seen as somebody that is wealthy, and also come with the pride, come with the respect. So that mentality, that perception of cow being seen as a symbol of one being powerful or being respected is aiding and abetting to the problem of cattle. Now, there is also issue of cultural belief of male being aggressive, which goes to the psychology. The use back then, cultural belief there was an idea that youths have to get involved in doing some stuff like raiding cattle to prove that they have the stamina of being called a male. Or even in some instances, there were believed that if a youth organize a raid during the age set namings, they have to organize the raids and go into other people's societies to steal cows and bring them. That way, they will establish that they have a position in the community. So those are few things that really help. Now, what are the solutions? There is a belief, and I believe strongly about this, that if it's done right, it could help as a solution to the problem. Number one is succession of hostilities. Create a buffer zone between the tribes, and that will cut the violence, the cycle of violence. It will also give an opportunity for the tribes, these three communities, a window to negotiate the term of the peace. But first of all, you have to break down the violence that is happening by creating a buffer zone. The other thing is to demarcate the boundary. There are no boundaries between the two regions now. With the people area being given its own status, there's no boundary, and that need to happen, because if it happens, then the policing will be done at the boundary areas. Now it's okay between the Dingabor here and the law, because our boundaries are clear and cut, and that is helping community leaders, the police, to ensure that the youth that are causing problem at the boundary are very much informed and told not to engage in destructive community politics. So that issue of boundary has to be a priority. The other thing is create an educational programs that promote national identity and intergroups understanding. The communities are not uh, understanding themselves because there's no standard of education across the region. So that has to be given a priority to create a national curriculum that promote peace, national identity, and intergroup understanding. That need to be done. The other thing is promote diversification of the economy. The economy in South Sudan, especially in Jonglei, revolve around cows. That need to change because the environment is changing. The people themselves are changing, and cows or cattle are not going to be sustaining when it comes to livelihood in the near future. So there has to be a nationalized program to promote a diversification of the economy, not only in Jonglei but across in South Sudan. Because what's happening in Jonglei is just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to engulf, God forbid, it's going to replicate itself across South Sudan. So for people that see it as an isolated problem of Jonglei, uh, consider yourself informed that in the next year or so, chances are we're going to see the same thing happen it's already happening in Rumbek, actually, Rumbek, in Lagos State. It might be also happening between the unity, especially in Mayom County, and the people of the Werraps area, where there are constant skirmishes over cattle. So those are signs that the cattle problem is becoming a national problem. So there has to be promotion and diversification of the economy. What's the other thing? There has to be also um, authorities has to promote what is called a, a mechanized, commercialized form of cattle business. If people want to engage in business, it has to be made a legal market. So the government, if, in Jonglei, if people are to make sure that those who want to buy cows for marriages, for whatever reason, have a government located where business people who marketing their cows can go in there and sell their cow legally, which means the cow has to have some form of identifications, because if somebody steals somebody's cows and it's identified, as it is being done here in most, especially in the United States here, they have microchips that are attached to cattle. If somebody steals somebody's cow, that cow is going to be tracked down through microchip. That is a protective way to ensure that those who steal cows can be held accountable through finding where those cows are. So if they use come from Murule and steal cows that are microchip or those have proper identifications, then they can be tracked down and fined that, and they can be returned to their rightful owners. Now, somebody might ask, well, people brand their cows or cut their cow ears, but people have been known to steal cow and cut the whole ear off, to provide people from identifying their cows. So there has to be more modern ways of IDing the cows. That has to be also given a priority. Lastly, the issue of disarmament itself, has to be taken seriously, but it has to be done in a proper way. The last time it was done, and I hope this time, if it's going to be done, it's going to be done in a good way. Last time it was the victim that was disarmed person. That was terribly wrong because the government knew then who were the perpetrators of this violence, who
Uh,
started it.
Dr. Philip,
Yeah.
there is a question from Samuel Morol and also Dr. Deng's David Tang also have talked of the insecurity. I think lack of education, but also there are laws in place, policies to govern the oil abstraction, but the implementation, there is lacks of implementation. So if you can answer that later on. Dr. Philip, Samuel don't agree with you with the issue of a number of cows being paid as a motivational factor because the people in the jungle area, some of the people think that they don't really go and rate for the matter of gaining cattle to get married. Is that, do you agree?
Well, that's what I have said earlier. These are not linear factors, but they are contributing factors. I mentioned earlier that some people go in not because they want cattle, but they go in to revenge. There's an element of revenge, which goes back to cycle of violence that I talked earlier. So if somebody comes like they did, there was a very tragic situation that happened every time and a time. But let me give a simple example.
Okay,
I think a year or two ago.
Dr. Philip as well, Deng's David Tang, the chairperson of the SPLM in Australia, said that disarmament should be done. Can that be a solution as well, considering? Thank you.
Yeah, I will go back to the issue of disarmament, but let me provide this example of, especially with the issue of revenge. A year or two ago, Murley went to, I'm not sure whether it was Gower or Low area, but the report was that an elder was killed with 18 of his sons, 18 of his children. Think of the psychological impact on that family. A father is killed with his 18 children. What would their uncles, their relatives think? The only thing that would come to their mind is to go and avenge. So revenge is another factor too. It causes people to go and attacks other people. Coming back to the issue of disarmament that I said earlier, disarmament is a solution if done properly. But like I have said earlier, it was started poorly. It was the victim that was disarmed first. That's why societies that were considered themselves as victims refuse to surrender their weapon because they see themselves as victims. And if you are being victimized and you have a firearm, what will happen if you give in your weapon and you know that the perpetrator is still armed and dangerous outside there? So disarmament is a priority and it's a solution, and it has to be done and started with the perpetrator. Now, I wish we had somebody from people on this panel to ask this question: that for sincerity in my research, most of the attacks originated from people since 2012. And what happening is either the law are will launch a counterattacks or the board will launch a counterattacks. So we know the center of gravity of the conflict, which is the people itself. I'm not blaming them, but that's a facts base. If anybody is questioning that belief, go and look since 2009 how many attacks originated in Pibor and how many attacks originated in Law area, how many attacks originated in Bor area. You will come to a realization that most of the attack, 80% of them originated in Pibor. So if disarmament is to be the solution, it has to be started in PBO area. But first, there has to be a succession of hostilities. That is the fundamental of disarmament. Succession of hostilities, and then disarm the perpetrator first and come to ask the victim to surrender their weapons. That
In
too, there has to be a weapon police. There's no policing in the whole region. So how are you going to disarm people and you don't have the police to protect people? So as somebody was saying that it has to be done simultaneously, well, the government has to institute policing if disarmament has to work. But without policing, disarmament is a recipe for disaster. So I will not support disarmament as things are right now because it's counterintuitive in a way that you can be disarming the victims and expect them to survive the next attacks. So policing has to be also a priority and element of disarmament itself. But also there has to be incentive to disarmament. What do I mean by that? Because of the poverty, people are buying weapons. So these people that have firearms, some of them are not the government provided weapons. They bought them with their own money. So to make it attractive, the government has to create a buying program. The government has to buy back the weapons, the firearm from civilian. It will make it a peaceful transition because if you are to hand down your gun and you are getting $100, instead of refusing and know that if you refuse, the government is going to take it anyway, create an incentive that will enable people to surrender their weapon without the resistance, without the fight, and that will be a easy way to get the weapon out of the hands of the civilian. That, to me, is the strategy of disarmament that will work. It will be incentivized. At the same time, it will be bloodless because
Okay,
there will be no resistance from the people.
Dr. Philip, we will come back to you. I think the reason why we gave you much time, you were not very clear from the start. And this is very important topic, area that you have done a research. You have identified the regular routes being used by the attackers. Can you mention them within 2 minutes? And if you were to be given a chance to be a police.
I'm getting a charger. My phone is running low. Let me get a charger.
Okay, good. Okay. And then we'll go to Deng. Uh, David Tang
All right.
stated that there are laws in place, but the implementation is lacking. So, what could we do to advocate for this implementation?
First of all, I want to thank David Change for that question. That's a very good um, question. Well, South Sudan Petroleum Law of 2010 is a clear good law. But that's what we call good law because it lacked implementation. If South Sudanese can have an implementation mechanism, accountability and transparent, then we will have implementation mechanism in place. But today, we have a good law, but we don't have a commission. For example, if there is a disagreement between the extractive industry and the local communities, then the law said the communities can take their case to the minister. To that, there is actually a problem right there because of personal interest. The Minister of Petroleum is the one that work with the extractive industry. So implementation mechanism are missing in South Sudan, and if there should be implementation, then they have to be transparent. And what do I mean about that is where a situation whereby citizen can review and be able to comment on that. As we speak, none of those things are there or can be found. Number two, the socio-economic and environmental impact of extractive industry are severe. And if we continue not having any implementation, then we are going to suffer. South Sudan oil is going to run out in 2040. 98% of South Sudan GDP come from oil. What will happen? There is there's no investment. What we get is end up being used. and there is no other investment avenue because there's no implementation. If
Okay.
anything is being done today, it's not going to be implemented. The
Then
only thing we have is roads, and that is the best program. And I'm ready to be challenged on that, but I can see a benefit of that being built. Although the other road to Baragizal was wiped out, that is a lack of implementation as well as evaluation. And this is what we need to have our South Sudanese coming in and evaluate to have also implementation mechanism on place.
now you have talked of oil being non-renewables, something that can be used and once and for all. And I think many of our people in authority are not aware of that. And you mentioned that it will be out by 2040. That is laughable. Okay, what can we do to ensure that we have done enough investment such that it could be used in the future to generate revenues?
A good question again. I think a lot can be done. South Sudan have a lot of renewable energy apart from oil. We have Nile water that we can use to build dam. We have Pula Dam that should have actually been renovated and be in place today. We have sun, a sun in South Sudan. We have a sun that shines for 13 hours in South Sudan. A 1 day sunshine can electrify Netherlands for 2 days. A 1 day sunshine, but we are not making use of that. We are getting money and we are just pouring it like we are pouring them in a dustbin and be recycled. There's no recycling. If there is a mechanism whereby we can invest them in agriculture, in education, so people can be educated, and also we can build our, just like what we are is being done in Rwanda. Then South Sudan can maintain and sustain their economy. We have animals like South Sudan is the second country in the world with so many cattle after India. We are not investing in that area. We have agriculture. 8% of South Sudan has been acquired by foreign countries to do the agricultural development, the first being the EUA, United Arab Emirates. What are they doing? They are going to do agricultural planting rice. We did not invest in rice. Soon we are going to be importing our food much than ever from Uganda. Why? Because we have not invested our oil money in the agriculture. With oil going to run out, what will happen? I don't really know what will happen. I wish our leaders can think about it. Well, if you select a general to be a manager or to be a minister, that does not mean a general has knowledge in money, in managing revenues, as well as in investing revenue. But he or she might have administrative, but that does not mean you know it all. We can see that in the agreement, which is oil transparent fee, which was badly because it was done by someone who was given that position solely because he was a general, and now we're paying price for that. And those money could have been used in the investment that will help South Sudan until 2060.
Okay, let us go back to Dr. John Quek. We'll be coming quite often to Dr. John Quek because of him being a psychologist. Dr. John, there is a concept, like someone, if you go and raid a certain village and come back with cows, you will be considered someone who is very aggressive and well respected. And how do we overcome such a behavior? And the issue of revenge as well, those two, and the psychological impacts on the relative whose parents are killed. Dr. Philip did not answer the question of child abduction. What are the motives which have led to the child abduction? Is there also a market for that? Thanks, Deng Duot. Yeah, and Dr. Philip, thank you. Welcome, Dr. John Quek.
Brother Lual, thank you very much. I will try to be very brief in this. I have spoken about societal regression, whereby you see issues in family, get transmitted to society, and then you see a crisis in society. And then I said, societal regression is what we see when a natural disaster happens or a man-made disaster like war going on in South Sudan. So those things are caused by that transmission from having issues within family, within group, and then you all of a sudden you see that up there, and then we see sign of those as violent. When we see abuse, we see crime, we see more divorce, and we see tension between the majority and minority tribe. And then from there, you see a less decision making from the top or from the so-called government. So now the motive we're talking about, why a young man is groomed by a family to go and raid, and that is glorified by, or go and hurt other people, and that is glorified by the society. What happened here? Well, our lives, Lual, is shaped by our upbringing, by our family. There are societies that are called collective society and the individualized society. In collective society, it means your life depends on the people who brought you up, people whom you were born and grew up in that circle. So whatever is seen by that given society is what it is that you will carry on as a young man. So let's say in our areas, I will not be naive to speak about other societies in South Sudan or other tribes. But for example, let me mention about Nuer culture. If you're a young man, if you're a boy, you do not receive your mark yet. Then you're a boy. You are not allowed to participate in anything that men do. So when the year you receive your traditional mark on your forehead, then you are upgraded. You are graduated into manhood. Okay. So when you are graduated into manhood, you are expected by your family to defend them. Okay. Take that word. You are now a defender of that society, a defender of your family, a defender of the society, whereby you will put up with anything. You may be a small man, a young man, barely graduating to a manhood at age 14, 15. Then guess what? If a grown man, male, come to your house, you will put up a fight. Okay? Then you're going to go out there and defend your family. I think the same thing is true in many societies around the world. So if that is it, what happens if somebody come from the next door and try to beat up a young person in that family, or try to intimidate you, or try to take your livelihood? Let's say you have some properties outside, cattle being one of them. What do? You got to go and defend that family. You got to go and bring those properties back. Okay, that is our cultural upbringing. Now, in South Sudan, in the midst of all these issues, you hear some people left and right criticizing elders. Elders as being the one fueling the war, as being the one, encouraging the war to continue, being the one to use the youth to go and fight, right? And people are hoping for the next generation to come, and the next generation will be the better one. Take it from me today. The next generation would come from where? Come from the generation of today, and the generation of today will teach the generation of tomorrow from from where? From their own values. Whatever they live in today, whatever they behave, like today, whatever they have today is something that they will put in the heart and mind of the next generation. So we are going to see even a very hostile society tomorrow than today. At least today we are fortunate to have some elders among us who have these values in them, whose values in them have not completely been wiped out by the war. Okay? So what happened? Who is to be blamed here? But we found ourselves in it, and now we have all these issues. I think we should not hope for the next generation to come and be the one to neutralize, to be the one to give us, a peace or a good society in South Sudan. No, our work should begin now. and education, whereby we go and tell people, you know what, those values that we used to entertain, being brave, you're a young man, you're a defender, you got to go, you have to sacrifice yourself. Those are no longer, beneficial to us today. So we are now in a modern society whereby you have to support your family in a good way. Your society, you're the next leader. Think about leading people of tomorrow. So coming to the solution of issues going on in South Sudan today, which is the main motivation why we are on this forum. Okay, we first have to make sure we work so hard to bring peace in South Sudan. When you bring peace, a total peace, a comprehensive peace in South Sudan, policing that my brother Dr. Philip talked about will be realized. What in the world you will form a policing if you cannot go to that particular area? Okay? What in the world you can form policing while you do not have, you know, uh, institution in the area where people benefit from? You don't have schooling in those areas. You don't have any, uh, uh, let's say, technical training in those areas, whereby you neutralize the mind of those people who grew up in war, who grew up knowing war, knowing how to shoot gun. Everybody has gun in South Sudan. Dr. Philip already mentioned. Some people have multiple gun in their houses. So how are you going to going to them and say, hey, peace is here? You have to bring a comprehensive peace whereby they will see their son and daughters in policing, to be able to go and say, hey, there are opportunities here. Like Dr. Philip said, opportunities here. Take some loan, we buy your gun, you name it, you go to school. So what we're seeing now is something that will continue in the future of South Sudan if it is not de-escalate from here and now.
Okay. I think because Dr. Philip have had a long ship, and we wake up Dr. Jones very. I think that was about 5 a.m. And Dr. Deng from the UK might have got other commitments. It was really nice having you, and we shall continue having the same discussion in the future. We are going to summarize our talks such that you can have time. I thank you, Ted, Samuel, and also David and Reverend Peter. To those who have comments and those who are listening, thank you so much for being with us. And Rock Dengmabur. Now, most of the issues, especially not like the war that we have had in South Sudan, and we continue having war, always start. It does happen in the Upper Nile. Something bothering. We are engaging in wars, and that's why there had never been development. What can we do to bring something that can bring unity among the people in the greater Upper Nile? Uh, in 2 minutes, then.
All right. I think I will be sticking to my area of research and the
Okay, good.
impact.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Our topic today was cattle raiding, and a lot of issues that fuel cattle raiding are the effect of socioeconomic and environmental impact. On social, it has impact on civilian death, children being abducted, and trauma. Enabling factors are things like gun, as well as rebellious leaders being promoted in the by the government to get in. And I think we all know what happened. And environmental factors being people, ethnics, people being displaced. Conflict has been recorded, as John mentioned before. Actually, the peace agreement happened in 1962. From 1962 to present, there have been 12 peace agreements signed. First being signed by Ajang Duwar Bioragwer, who was a chief of Kongor. and those things have been violated. It doesn't mean that those impacts have ended. It is continuing. They are continuing every day and will be seen as big issue, as Dr. Manyok mentioned before. We have seen it in Kenya. They have been raiding. The Turkanas has raided Koromachong in Uganda. So, and that's why these things is very important for us to discuss it. Why is it also important is I will talk about a story of a chicken. Chickens are kept by human being, and chicken will be fed by a man, and that chicken will love that man, thinking they are good friend. But that man knows one day that chicken will end up in his pot, and he will eat that chicken. The same problem, that is one thing we need to understand. The problem happening today in Jonkule will not only be within Jonkule communities. It will come to Kenya. The Turkana will probably raid the Pakut, the Koromajong, the Turkana will be raided by Taposa. That circle will continue, and that's why it's important. Other researchers have written a lot, like Malcolm and Dr. Akech, Roland, and Deng the Quick has written all these things. So it's going to impact a lot of the communities. And with the issue of oil coming in South Sudan today, we are going to see a lot of problems with our leaders, our government, not having policies of implementing things that needed to be done, that are going to be on top of it. Why I think so? I think so because in area like Manyok said, um, the area between the Murule and the Dinka in Kachtom has not been demarcated, so we don't know who owned that land. And when oil industry come in later, well, they will not have that provision of land acquisition. So that is something that we also need to discuss, and why we should pay attention. And the government also must stop these things of rewarding individuals that revolt against them in giving them position, but have mechanism of having a peace agreement and having accountability as well. And why is it important? Because we have seen these issues in the case of Sarajevo, in the case of Rwanda genocide, where people were branded as MTN. In South Sudan, people were branded as cockroaches in Rwanda. In South Sudan, people were branded as MTN. We have seen that in Central African Republic. We have seen that in Sectarian Berlin in Iraq, and we have seen that in Sierra Leone during the time of Diamond War. So these problems are socio-economic and environmental impact. Same thing as cattle raiding. What are we going to see? We are going to see a lot of these problems. Dr. Manyok mentioned this. For example, in 2010 alone, there were 225 incidences of cattle raiding. Today, just in July, there are 16 attempts or cattle raiding. What will happen in the near future? Well, we need to research this. We need to look into it. So with that, we can have a serious understanding and conversation on how to solve this. The first would be the issue of cattle raiding, boundaries, as well as what can we do for our people. A good thing to solve all this is education, investing in education, investing in renewable energy to get revenue, other things like minerals in South Sudan. In the case of Elim Triangle, there's a good deposit of gold there that the government can tap in. Why? Because the gold oil today is negative, is 47, and for South Sudan to be benefiting from oil revenue, a oil price has to be 67. Why? Because we pay a lot of money to the Khartoum government than what we are getting. So a lot of problems are all these things. What do we need? We need implementation of our policies. We need to review our policies, especially the contract that was signed in 1997. We need to know we have production sharing agreement in oil industry in South Sudan. But when is that going to end? When are they going to tell us we have gotten our money? South Sudan do not even have, they don't have access to the book. so that they can know these are the amount of oil we produce in a day. Although there are 300,000 barrels, did we verify it? We did not verify it. So these are the issues that we need to know, like in involving in the conversation with the communities, empowering communities, looking at the issues that are affecting us, and us stopping these things of putting pictures on the wall, on Facebook wall. It is going to exacerbate the problem, and always like what we have seen in Rwanda in the case of Akiesu, who was protecting the Hutus, and that's exactly how it's going to be. It is now, because we have one person who said, I'm quoting here, Akutlwa, who said his mission is to protect the interests of minorities. What about if the minorities are the one attacking people? That is a question I would ask Dr. Manyok to answer in the future, later on, because there's no in South Sudan there is no stand your ground laws. So should the other communities be listening or be staying without being attacked and not responding, or should they also defend themselves? And if they can defend themselves, if that's not going to exacerbate the whole problem. Also, if our leaders are looking into this, what is the end game? Um, Cattle raiding in the other communities, except the other communities keep cattle, except the Ngalam. Ngalam do not keep cattle, and this is in your dissertation, Dr. Philip. Ngalam do not keep cattle, and you were forced to give up cattle by the Murle. What is the end game? What is the main vision of this community, and how can young people like us here advise the communities to look into all these problems? One of my friends is talking about Elim Triangle. That's a case. My article will be coming up soon on the claim that the South Sudan actually have the right of Elim Triangle, although Kenya is claiming a peaceful occupation, which is not in the international law. And you can look in case of USA v Netherlands. Thanks.
Yeah, that was very extensive. That's very good. I think we are going to finalize it. I think the psychologists will close the show. Dr. Philip, if you could say something of the regular routes being used by the attackers for record, and your finance statements, because we may come back another time. It's getting late at your place as well. Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for this lively discussions. I'm not going to repeat everything, but one thing that I would add to the piece of disarmament that I was saying earlier, that we have to buy the weapon from the civilians, and then as a last ways of making sure this weapon don't come back, we are asking the government when that happened to not to put the weapon in default. This weapon has to be very much destroyed. So there has to be complete destruction of the firearms. So if they are bought, they has to be destroyed. Because what had happened the last time, some of the weapons that were actually designed from the hand of the civilian found their way through the black market again. So to make sure, as a way of making sure this weapon don't come back in the hand of civilian, there has to be a program to completely destroy it with the verification by the community leaders and the elders and the government itself, including the UNIMIS representative. Make sure those weapons are destroyed. It will create uh, a very much powerful message to let people know these weapons are not coming back. They are gone for good. So it was one thing that I want to add. And to end, I want to emphasize the power of education. Education is so powerful. We don't want to go to an extreme that the Chinese are going through. But Chinese have done a radical reforms, if I may say, where people that are deemed radicals in a community are very much given a training on how to change their mindset to conform to a modern society, to a society. So if it means that the government should go raw by introducing a reform program that provide training for the people that are being disarmed, the young people, the child soldiers that are being recruited in these militia groups to go through a training program to provide them with vocational trainings, to provide them with the sense of national identity to identify themselves as South Sudanese in the state of Dinka or Nuer or the Murule, then it will be beneficial to have an education program for the people that are being disarmed. Now, to rest my case, the government of South Sudan here has a big burden on its shoulder. Whether it will accept it or not, the security related to cattle rustling is going to turn into political situation. So if you want to have a real peace between the warring parties, the oppositions, the SPLM and the IO and all this, you got to start to make sure that the issue of cattle rustling don't metamorphose into a national politics. If people like Akud Lual are saying that, if he has really said that, which I believe because he was on a show, Madingo show, and I'm very sure Madingo did not video shoot him or Photoshop it. It's him who say that his interest is to protect the minority tribe. In this case, it was the Murule that he was referring to Deng to answer your question. There was nothing about it because he was asked in the context of why he went to Pibo to talk. So that was in that context. Now, Akudlual, if he is a special envoy of the president of South Sudan, and he saying his interest as an envoy of a national government, the Republic of South Sudan, is to protect the minority, then what is his message? How is he going to protect the majority that are being victimized? So what will be his response? I would put to him that, okay, Mr. Envoy, what are your measures to protect the majority that are being victimized by the very small minority that you are saying is the minority? That is how a local conflict can turn into a national conflict. So if those of Wani and the people that are given the task of making sure that the investigation as to what happened in Jonglei, there's no investigation. We know what is happening is people are fighting. So what we need to do is, instead of wasting our money on necessary and unnecessary investigation, use that money to start a dialogue, a people dialogue between people. What are you going to investigate? Why did you not start investigating when the conflict started in 2000, when it escalated in 2009? That was the time to launch an investigation to making sure it doesn't happen again. Now they are going to investigate this, what happened, then the government is going to go silent as it always does. So that probably a waste of resources. Start dialogue between people, and that would help. So my message to all people of Jonglei, whether Murle, the Nuer, and the Dinka, is we have to make a choice. What kind of Jonglei we want? A Jonglei where we raise our kid experiencing violence, a Jonglei where a mother go to bed not knowing when whether she will find her kid on her side in the morning, a Jonglei where an elder go to bed and not sure whether the village will be burned down to the ground, or a Jonglei where a mother go to bed knowing a child will be there, a Jonglei where a grandfather is going to bed and know that the community will be at peace tomorrow, a Jonglei state that a youth will go to bed knowing that he will be going to school, not to plan an attack tomorrow. We have to choose of what kind of society we want. And as for me and for majority of us who are on this show, we are advocating that a young lay of peace and coexistence among the people of all Jonglei, whether you are the minority or the majority, a Jonglei of coexistence. That's the Jonglei we are actually advocating on this show tonight and wherever you are. So for a few of you that are listening, where you are, uh, we know it's a tragic situation that is unfolding in Jonglei, but we don't have to give up. We don't have to buy into the notion that Jonglei will be a place that will not come back again. Let's work for peace. Let's encourage our elders. Let's encourage our politicians. And let's encourage our churches. The churches have been the backbone of peace in the Alpha Nile as much as I can remember. You know, the peace of 1991, 1990, and 1991, the Woon Late Peace Conference, that peace had been sustained. It has sustained stability, and it has brought uh, a process between the Nuer and the Dinka during that time. Those were the tough days, but because the church were involved, now we have seen a return, a slowly return of peace between the Lao and the Dinka, between those of Mayom and those of Wera. It's because the church was involved. So let's not forget the church roles here. If you go to a church, encourage church pastors, encourage the bishops, because that's where real peace will come. Real peace is not going to come from Juba, because those in Juba are toxic as the oil that is killing our people in the Republic of South Sudan. So thank you very much for two of you that are listening. May God bless people of Jonglei, and may peace come to our region. Thank you.
It was really good. It was really good. Now we will have our psychologist to say something.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I enjoy so much from my
and
colleague here.
I hope we should continue having the same conversation and provide
Correct.
summary.
Here is my short.
Read up first.
Chichunanga, chichindanga, chichunanga, chichindanga, chichunanga, chichindanga, chichunanga, chichindanga. Nature win, come the other one. Veranum giant, veranum giant, veranum giant. Chichunanga, chichindanga, chichunanga, chichindanga. Chichunanga, 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 chichunanga. Nature win, come the other one. Veranum giant, veranum giant, veranum giant. Wait up, wait up, wait up, wait up, wait up, wait up, wait up. Aweda, I'm not looking at the one belly. I'm the meditative, Jabutuli. Aweda,
Okay, Dr. John, welcome. And
Yeah.
before we finish later on, you will summarize it in Luer, and also Dr. Philip will say something in Dinka, and also the same thing to Deng for the benefit of our people back home. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter Mel. What I want to leave with our audience here, the last word. To me, in my opinion, having cattle should not be a curse on South Sudanese people or in us. So having cattle is actually a blessing. It means we have resources. It means South Sudan is not poor. It's rich. We have mineral, natural resources, and we have livestock. So the problem is not cattle, but the problem is lack of lawlessness in South Sudan. The solution will come from the so-called government. before we have a functional government in that state house, South Sudan may not be able to experience a lasting peace anytime soon. Why the military train people? Why young men are recruited and before you fire a gun, you are taken to training? Why? Well, the very simple answer is the government has to destroy a young man that has just come from their house, from their home, from that culture in that house, where violence is entertained in that house, where braveness is seen in in action. You go and raid other people, and then you come back, you glorified. One day I saw a video, a clip from the Murale. Young men were roaring like lions when they were coming, preparing to come to attack the Lone. The young men were roaring like the lion, and that is their upbringing from the Murale. So the military would take young people and train them. Why? They destroy them mentally. So everything has to do with your mental well-being. Okay, whatever action, whatever that is, it has to come from here. It's psychological. So people have to be destroyed. Young men have to be trained, destroyed mentally, and then the military will rebuild them. When they are rebuilt, they will be given one culture only to go outside and execute the mission. Society is not a problem. Anyone you see in the road will actually provide something to you. It's not your enemy. Okay? That very culture is given to young men as soldiers. So we should have done the same. When South Sudan became an independent nation, number one should have been an education to change, to transform the mind, okay? To transform the mind and let the mind see that South Sudan now is indeed a nation of its own, whereby nationalism should be your number one priority rather than your tribalism. Okay, your national identity should come first, and that should not really emerge by itself. It has to be done by leaders on top, whereby society have to be given a proper education. Education is the key. We often hear about this, and this is exactly what it is. If I'm not transformed mentally, my brother, I will behave the same way I was raised, wherever that is. So for South Sudan or Jonglei to receive a lasting peace, cattle will not go anywhere. Cattle will remain part of our society, but education has to come to those small tribes that might be still there behaving the same way. Okay? Because if we say peace come to South Sudan, we have businesses in Nuer area, and Dinka area, and other areas, and there is no development in Murle area. What do we expect the Murle young men to do? Do I blame the Murle young men? Well, I mean, crime cannot be tolerated, okay? For that purpose, I would blame them. But for behaving the way they are, if they come and snatch cows, stolen cows, because that is their sustained living, I can't blame Murale. If I'm the government today, I would make sure the Murale are given the opportunity that the other society have. They need to have an education. They need to have some small businesses. They need to have training, basic training in their areas. They need to have police that are men and women of their culture, of their tribe, for them to listen to them. Okay, you can't expect Murale to behave civil while you have not neutralized their upbringing. So this is a challenge that goes to the government of South Sudan. And for the Murale people who might be watching your show, Peter Deng, I want them to come to your show next time. We have to continue talking about how to bring peace to South Sudan as a whole, not only Jonglei state as the region, a Jonglei region. South Sudan as a whole. You see in Baragazal what happened. Okay, there is a clannish kind of extermination going on. A month or few months back, I have seen even cows is slaughtered, killed because of a dispute, intercommunal dispute between people there. So you everywhere you go, you see this problem, but it is more serious in Jonglei now. Why? Because it has taken a very different turn. You see politicians now involving in it, such as someone like a Kulwal, who's quote, was read by the Dr. Deng here. Okay, so if you are there, if your mission is to protect the small tribe, how? That should be a question to be answered by him. How are you going to protect the small tribe? And what do you do for the big tribe that have been victimized as well? That's the question posed by Dr. Philip. So all in all, my people, uh, we need a serious transformation. Psychologically, we need a serious transformation. So we see our world the same way. We do not see South Sudan the same way. I see South Sudan through my tribal lens. And you do see South Sudan the same. I may pretend that I'm a psychologist, I'm highly educated. I do not embrace my tribe. No, I would be lying to you. I would be lying. If I see my tribal members killed tomorrow, I will rise up and try, to revenge. Vengeance will not take us anywhere. It will be a repetitive situation, and South Sudan will see itself in this vicious cycle here and there. It's the mission of someone like Deng to bring this issue to an end. Let's hope for the better South Sudan. Let's hope for a South Sudan of educated men and women. That their mission is to transform South Sudan into civil life, into in a modern life. Okay, whereby young men of South Sudan are the same. There is no Mole, there is no Dinka, there is no Nuer, there is no Chuluk, there is no Anuak. Different from me. That we're all the same. But for us to be the same, we have to be transformed, like the military. That bring in men and women from all walk of life and train them and give them one culture. And that's what we want. Thank you very much, Peter. There.
You're welcome. I don't think if 2 minutes will be enough for you to say to pass the importance of what we have talked about, spiritual peace among our people in Luer.
Okay. Well, me de la ye ne diana liang ke show me. Topic of one carol rustling. Carol raiding. And yeah, no more between the Murale, the Low, and the Greater Dinka board. Beside that, we are talking about insecurity in South Sudan. Keliu. Oh, ngumu no wo South Sudan ke ba wi muga. Mi chi wi ko ken. Ko ngumu no kor ka jonglei. And wale mroi kone wale. I think somebody is killed because I hear the news every day now. Liang news dorani chiang. Ago somebody chana. Ni apan wana me in my area ko lo nuer. 2 people were killed. Ram ngad me bana ka kuma. Young man ba jen be guli chi mane ki morele ni jabana. And now we no more ba to ne. Jen kusiana no more. Kokon mi gor ko non South Sudan bala we mi chi wi ko ken. Tin china liu tin chiang ko kor. Ngu bana lat. Right la ne entame. Lat ko no ne kon dial. Bana nen la people ti garam ke li jiwe ti jidor ken. No mo bane ko la didi. Kon gor kon government. Number 1. Gor kon ngot ka South Sudan. Government mo ga me for all people. Government mo. Ba kule ben ko kon ka dori kon dial ba kon kule ben jo yen go man ka ne wunu ti bo ka police force. Ba police kule create. Be police mo ba na kula gang. Ba di kula la kam jan ka ne nuer kam murle ka ne jang ka kam murle ka ne nueri. Ko di ka jongle and nuer jongle have no issues now. Tell a problem. Chai walk cha kan karodian. Carol rating kia kana wa ka murle ni kana low cha to ne 1980 from 1980 medan early 80s ajene la low yen medan biwo murle biga wa ba wa kan chiga le wa na more la kana wan ta ke revenge mi chi murle ni ben ba wa kan cha gu yo culture ma jago ko nan men de la ye ni ko na leng rai kon chana traumatize the whole South Sudan cha ta ga trauma mi di metatin whereby any method a trigger kiji anything a trigger kon telo kon mercy koro tero kon palika ko kon teno kon ko on guard all the time ko na mongu e war e chana period war e chana period kon gol kon complete transformation ko kon man ko le behave ala society mo ga ram ken kon no be benika be ben ko ban education ba to ki education ba to bidi ba to ko cho ta ga law in place educated chere ga ne gu yen ngati ta ko poro me chi ga de wore do riken de ran wo dorian ba che de wo doran de dien bu na ngi de wo na fin dor de wo na ko te lo ngon mi atin gor kon police force everywhere ka South Sudan be educated be ko le jal be jilo ko be ko le jal be NGOs be ko le jal ba mal ko le no je nana de la ye no mo no kon a chen kan shal ga show me wale wa titino one go a bi mal bi no ko jongle ko kon na puj we appeal to the government of South Sudan chen cha appeal the government of South Sudan o yen pan kun gore na gore expert gore de ba ye lo gore ne te ga ideas gore ne ya research la ka area mo me chali jongle yo ke societal issues gore ne di ki learning wono wa ba de ba you ko lo ke do not assume away you know it all chakon mulwa we reach out to you go there wo to implement a complete peace agreement to bring peace go there ne di chema tane ti ta ga line to wana ko ba you ko lo ke Peter Lwal, thank you very much. No de la dio tong nuara, tong ne na, wo yen pan kun. Lo government that. Government that jela government mu go ko no na mal doran. Ci lo de tes.
Jilo details. Chokran Kuar, thanks so much. Then, if you could tell us something in 2 minutes about the impact of the oil, something that you were talking about in Dinka.
And we took a glade we call chipping na jam dai ko le. Ke chu ku lwel agol ro na jam de etiene work page e pede wok ku yo ke yo pen che nwan ye yo de jat ama jun de jat pin ye ke bay ka ye ke bay kan wan koch ai pire ko ye ke yok na long de pir chima na ko chum ai a che ba chum ko ke ai ka nya te den pin war ye ke retin be ke la re der pe e kene a chi ke ba nang na ko to chima na wa ko wa re to ka chi rai de na chi ke be yo ko ke ne a banken te jore pin ken ke kai ka jur to ko banye jur to wan pa na yo yo nga banye la e ka chi ka ye ko muksuli ne ja ma ko ja do ja ye ke loy ko be ya be pir bu war be pir da bu war go ko war pie da wan ye mo la gok be chi be go ko ja ye ko loy be ko da go ja we e ka chi ka e ja ka be ka e ja ka be ya ai ti mai ka riok na chi ka tim riok cái chi ka ko lo go da ya bu dia chi mena dia liat ai a wo de ja ta ye ke tiam a be ke mi riok e ke na chro lo chi mena de pa ne chol thar jat ama pa na pa na jing da padang rueng e ka chi ka ke a chro lo pa na yung bro lo ke chit ka du ko lo gol bun ju ga gol ne jam de ke ne kan page go ne murle kuna koy kogrer ke no wo pan jong play ten e ka chika ka jam wo ke ka chu kulwel ku e jenge page ama murle nge page to ko yokulwel ne tongi ka chiro lo jenga che page jenga che la ya be mi ga latin anon ko chi jam kulwel ke e murle e ka che diet ke dan chi diet nga ye ke mi ye mi ga jeng ye ke mi ga jeng wala mi ga nwer agun mi ga nywa ke jot pay aton ne cheng de murlei ke de ne ko loy be ya page e ka chi ka ke a chen long jam be kran de ram page ka che yi kene ye ne ka ye kor benang dor anong dor bi chiro loy chi mana runa te da tem kuro ye ne ke goli yen be dor loy rana cho jang do de biur duot da gwer a che wer nga che ta ni ke na banjwe ke murle ko ke ran ben loy ya ke yen chen ke dang ka ju kan ga dor ke tier ko to a chiro loy cái coi cái gật chỉ cái luyện chỉ mà ra nó cho Roland chỉ mà ra nó cho đen được quyết chỉ mà ra nó cho lá kịch chỉ mà ra nó cho lẹn à chỉ jam của luyện cái mua lệ cái đòn chỉ ta như cái riok ấy cái riok nó ngu bany achi touch mana bany de jiem wala bany de nwe ko yen ka chi Dr. Philip ya manyok tor manyok chi gora ya e jien ka nong bany den ku bany den na chiran dit yen sultan ama yen bany no wut ke le ka chira lo pe ke ka pinke ali wu ke chi ke ne long da murle ayakum e ko chi ben ya le rich be ko la pe be ke diar yo be ke mi la pe yen ke ke pire ka chi ka jam wo ke yung le be ke chi ke ne nya ke le bi ci ke nyaay e benang ki ci dor benadi era an ci dor ma ñoko ci gat ko ci luel ne runa tu dongwan ke kanam dor ci ro loy kam de muru le ka jeng dor e ciol dor da ñidi dor a ñidi la ci ben rir a chan e loy ko kanisa na nong ke ci ban ci ban ci chaal benang ke ciol dor ka ko ben bi yen na jina pet be ping pet ko be yen ko yongu chiro loy acheran ti bandi to re de barnamane chama gon lo ngu e juba yengi wen ki jor e mo ndi den to ba yengi wen ki jor yengi man den ki jor e du pendi de kat kan nyal yenga ngi je keno ye do lo ya di e ko chi ko e ka le ko dor ba ka ko be ka mani ke chi kana chocolate wen bu ku ting yong bro loy ne long de jat ke ne ku ta antin bating ye ne ke kwen bangi ja ko tiama di cha le won ke chime ka ju jai ka bai ba chima ne yi bi diar be ka mi riok chima ne ko bi ka show ba den ku chin ka be yi ni pin do ke me jot ako ba nang to kul bi ka ya yi na bi jam da ben go ki ba yi to kula ba yi mu sai ba le ro mi to kuli bara ya baka kon di baka ka pi ko ka ya cham baka ya go jo no wo e ka chi ka ke ka ko le bu go le twen ja ta ya chi be go ju ju e pin no e ke chi ke ne ka ko bi ku ma ting yu bro loy o be ala dar chi mana da pa to panda abu ko bu ta ya bu wan ga ja bu ko be lom ku ta ke ga ku ya pu panda ka pe da ret ala bi ni pu nura ya chi man ku wan ye le bu nura be kenya piu ko kidi ne na le da ya lo yinge nur da go ku nura lom de tiyo ago mi ko go lo su kuli ku chu ku be la pan chi mana china ka pe ka chu ke lwen yong e kila twen e bi ko beta man wan ki ko tak wan theo ko bran wen rang ngi tien ka dang lo tin be ku bu ko je ko aya yu chi man ko wan chro le pa ni jong kule chi ni won tin wan be e bu kum ran tin e chola deni jak a bu kum ke ran ti ku be mat e ken ko ku je la ran de ya chi man diktor ma nya ma je bu ko loy bu ko na bu be ci man ko loyen ba bor be to pan ke ci ko to bor ka be to ya abu ko be ba ko be tong abu be jolo pi e ko ci ko ka ko be ke tin aya ka da lo ro da ko bu de ke ci man UN de gat kana ci lo ko ban ko ga ci ryo UN be kana gor UN ko bu tin ya nga re UN tin nga de UN a cin tin ga de UN ke yin ke UN de cin won du yo ku le ko ke ka ko bu ko kana lo ko UN la kule kene loy yuan to panda ka chi koy kene wo ko pet arai wo kra yang wo ki e pinye la chor ku tinga to pin kule le we koy company bag ke to ki chi man ke loro para cho le banok a chi da ba chi mer pin ku ka ba ga bu koy ko de ku mi ko ka to mi ko an la su kule be nyol nyol wo da ma to no chi man pa na cho lu lo bo kwere na jale juba ki lo numli ke lo bo thiotan ti ka jebelen e ka chi ka lo UN ke ako buku mat ku pal ku tom we nyira ga kwa ya ka ba ya ben ti man de ya mo ke duku en ni ke be 35% ti ge nga mu pin no mo ja yeti diet ku tuere ti ku ti akti kara ya 35 ma yinge 100 ba ka na go ku bana ja ku buka ler wotwen buka le buka lwen ku duku jo la ko ya 100 we 35% ni inga chi wo le twen ago ku ben ti nga ya en ba jam ku miaw ku lu ku le bu tong bu ko ja di ke dior nga bengi jam ku le tong bu ko ja le chan dior nga me di ngi jal ran ku mo chi jal ran chi ngi che et ya ti ye me ye mo de jor ku yen nga me de jor na ba ka bo ka ben le ka ka le wot wen yen kai chok da ya ba ka wen ni bu ku ben a jam ka chi ka achan ting chin piu yen ke lung luen kwen ke mon ko ri ni mi ke shopping cái tiền ka ba dia to chi to ne jam da yuen lekin ka ba dia ba ka ya pen no wo ako ku ya jam du kro nyai bi ku tin ne ay yen ke kel ba luen we chu ke lech e ping chu ping ni ka do lu ke ni na le ken we
Thank you very much, Deng Duod Buer and Dr. John Quick and Dr. Phil Manyok. I think we will not give Dr. Manyok a chance to talk in Dinka. You have already summarized it. Dear our viewers, please, thanks so much for being with us. We will continue having the show, delivering educational shows. And also, I hope Dr. Philip, Dr. Deng, Dr. John will provide us with the information, especially a summary of what we have discussed, and it will be published on Africa World Book website. Thank you, Mayen, and Yar, and many other people, Jim Kuch, David Tang, for being with us. Really, we appreciate your time, and those who are watching. I did not mention your name because I don't see the names. We'll close the show now. You are free to go.
No one gonna live forever.
wanna make a nation come together in peace. Do what you can, what you can. We gotta stand together. From liberation, we'll build a nation. We gotta stand together. Long live South Sudan. My friend, we gotta thank the authors for the books that they write. They sharpen our minds. My friend, let's celebrate Douglas Johnson for the work he has done for everyone, for everyone. We gotta stand together. From liberation, we'll build a nation. We gotta stand together. Long live South Sudan. Let's give our thanks to Norway for assistance and aid to brighten our day. My friend, let's walk away from darkness into the light of day. We find our way. We find our way. We gotta stand together. From liberation, we'll build a nation. We gotta stand together. Long live South Sudan. Long live South Sudan. Long live Africa World Books.
New Sudan, Bika mil nyong bai, Bika panda niar.
Green Production.
Kodo anja le jong ngarang mabir bagi bayi wadia ya damon ya daror mana mabir atim bagi big weji kwen go weji diru panda e ben bit nong arepi you know pe ben bit nong ajalep New Sudan e ben bit you know pe piala gwigran yiken ukolo ke bene ke chum dam wan je tiane jon garang na mabir Jaka ben bi kubag pada gwir jimana wan kor jon Cuman kor jagwede Nyale jangira den ti chaka nang adana wer Dewa konya mana binda yu weda chaka kwanyo Jon sonda gala ta konywa Wat ke bolo ale reche ding Atem yang atem Mila bebo kwen New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande Agwiar chagwir jon garang amabiut Ijawana jatau kedok nengenge Dua jenang ni wedia Dua keceng da jameror Mis ke jenuh Dua kekul jalu nywe Diktor banyak jatau kengi Webedu panda Dua keceng da jameror Mis ke jenuh Dua kekul jalu nywe Coba jaga gor Atem yang atem Kaya wil bemizu kwa dua ni pinda Atem yang atem anyot kwer Buke janyot gelej negalam Ya boy ceka gor Atem yang atem Kaya wil bemizu kwa dua ni pinda Elwale rej dedeng anyot kwer Buke janyot gelej negalam Nyali jangiran den chichag nong aduno wer. Ewa konya mana pinda yuweda jaget kwanyo. Johnson dagala ta konywa. What good boy wale rejading. Atimi yang atim mida bebo kwen. New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande. Kate wan jaga nyara kakindiri New Sudan ani mari chang panda. Bega wawa kekul kumil kena chila dirora kuitong da kuipanda. Yo kemide chang da bekaya jaga moto. Ikebain yarbia kwena kekul kepanden kekaya kul kegerawin gue baik. Nyali changiran den tijak nong aduno wer. Ewa konya mene pinda yuweda jaket kwanyo. John tondagala ta konywa. What good boy wale rejading. Atimi yang atim mida bebo kwen. New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande. Junub Sudan apanda kucha beduka kekul kepande wan yarbai. What good boy wale rejading. Atimi yang atim mida bebo kwen. New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande. Junub Sudan apanda kucha beduka kekul kepande wan yarbai. What good boy wale rejading. Atimi yang atim mida bebo kwen. New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande. Junub Sudan apanda kucha beduka kekul kepande wan yarbai. What good boy wale rejading. Atimi yang atim mida bebo kwen. New Sudan abeduka kekul kepande.